Oh man, it is Saturday. It's a little chilly outside. You better be coffeeed up. God damn it. Oh. This is COFOH Live Undead. I am your host, Daniel Crozier. I am here with the amazing Tim Seeley. Holy cow. But first, you write something on my face. Tim Seeley, how are you?
Hey, good to see you. It's been a while since we have been in the same space. That was way back in at a Seattle convention, way back, man, I don't know, 2010, maybe 11.
Maybe 2009. I mean, it's been a while.
Jesus.
Yeah,
Oh,
you aged way better than I did.
I don't know about that, man. We've got the same amount of sort of. You just stop caring, and the hair comes out of your face, and you just leave it. That's the age we're both at.
Right. I call this my chia pet phase.
I got neck chia too. That's
Oh,
not
nice.
bad. Yeah.
Nice. That means you are an adult now.
Yeah, exactly. Rapidly decaying adult.
Yeah, that's all we can do. That's the beauty of life. Yeah, it's that slow crawl to the grave.
That's why we're horror guys, because that's how we think, right?
That's right. That's right. Very optimistically.
Yeah, exactly.
Tim, it's great to see you. Yeah, I think that initial con that we met up at was Crypticon with our friend Chuck Messenger.
Yep. Back in the day. Wow. Yeah, that was fun. I miss cons so much. That was just like that random hangouts you get to do with people.
Yeah.
I ended up staying at Chuck's house for a couple days. Like it was just I didn't know him. It was just like here's a guy, and you go to his house, and then see his pugs, and race around the Washington countryside. Like it was just fun. The weird stuff I used to get myself into. I guess now it's just the weird stuff I get into is trying to entertain myself in the house. Is pretty much it.
Right. Yeah. How are you and the family doing?
Yeah, not bad. I mean, considering we haven't killed each other yet, we've been in the house together for a year, and so yeah. I mean, we had a lot of snow here in Chicago, and all it did was rip off one side of the house, which is not a big deal. Like we can fix that. So, pretty good so far, relatively speaking.
Geez, it ripped off part of your house, or?
Yeah, there was so much weight from the ice dams in all our gutters that I was teaching a class, and during the class, my face, because I could hear the whole thing falling off behind me. But it didn't open up into the house, which is great. There's just gutters all over my yard at this point. So, but compared to what other people are going through, not much compared to the poor people in Texas and Mississippi, Oklahoma. So yeah, we're doing pretty good.
Jeez, man, I'm sorry that that happened to you. That's pretty tough. In Chicago, well, I mean, for the most part, you guys are pretty much expect bad weather.
Yeah, I mean, and I grew up in Wisconsin.
Yeah,
live in Minneapolis. So, to me, Chicago weather generally is, a medium. It's not that bad. But this year was bad. I have to admit that this was some shit. I can't deny it. This was the most snow I've seen since I was a kid. So yeah, it was pretty epic. We got 18 inches in 1 or 2 days last week.
Jeez.
That's a lot. That's not typical for us. So. But Chicago was built for it. We kind of grumble through it. We shovel out our parking space, and it's fine. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. You guys, got the grit and the infrastructure to handle.
Exactly. We pay high taxes, and we get something for it. So
yeah. Jeez. So Tim, tell us a little bit about yourself in, how you grew up and how you got into comic books.
So I grew up in central Wisconsin, small town called Ringgold, which is not too far from the big town of Wausau, Wisconsin. And it was country. I lived in country, way out in the middle of nowhere. And actually, winter had a big part of it. There wasn't a lot to do, but we had a little country store not too far away that had a rack of comic books. So when my parents would take us to the grocery store, they'd plop us down in front of the comic rack. I remember it sitting there, and it was surrounded by taxidermy mounts of like rabbits and jackalopes.
Oh, yeah.
And so we would sit and pick up comics. And then, that was kind of just a way to entertain us. And we, my brothers and I would like draw and stuff. So that's how we got into comics. We were basically like, trying to keep ourselves busy. We read those, then we made our own comics. And that started when I was like 5 or 6. So that definitely sort of continued through all of school and high school, and then I ended up going to the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire, and the illustration program, and they let me do comics as my major in illustration, which was nice of them. And
Awesome.
And then I did an internship at Marvel Comics in 1999 as an editorial assistant on Spider-Man. And then when I rolled out of that, I was publishing stuff by myself, self-publishing a lot of like little indie comics, going to cons, not really knowing what I was doing, but I did it anyway. Then I got a job at a book company. And while I was working at the book company, I got a job working for Avatar Press, doing some booby comics for them. So the kids' books in the morning, booby books at night. And then my friend Josh Blaylock got the rights to G.I. Joe.
Nice.
So knowing that I had editorial experience on Spider-Man and I could draw sort of, and I could write, he asked me to come move to Chicago and help him out. So I took that. And then I ended up working at Devil's Due for 5 years. And when I went freelance, that's been the last 14 years, I guess, since I've been doing that. So, so I've never had any other job really, except for that brief moment in high school when I was working at Target and Burger King. But I've worked basically in art at some point since then.
Man, that's fantastic. That's awesome. When you were interning at Marvel, was that with working with Danny Fingeroth?
It was Ralph Macchio, actually, was the editor of Spider-Man at the time. And it was a summer internship. I got the Spider-Man office basically like editorial.
Mm-hmm.
So like my job was to like call freelancers and yell at them and stuff, like because it was an amazing internship because of what they let you do.
Yeah.
But now I work with Bart Sears at Heavy Metal. I remember when I was at Marvel in 1999 calling Bart and being like, Bart, we need these Spider-Woman pages. And I'm like a 19, 20, I was 21. I was a 21-year-old kid like telling Bart to get me some pages. Like, and now my job is still telling Bart Sears to get me some pages.
Yeah. Does he remember those days, with you?
I did not remind him, and I shall not. So if he sees this show, Bart.
Hopefully he won't watch this then.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's awesome. I can only imagine, being like a fly on the wall, those days, seeing all the crazy talent that you had to interact with back then, when you're green, and then, compared to like now, I'd imagine, a lot has obviously a lot has changed since then, but it sounds like it's the same old cool shit.
Well, it was weird too because it was Marvel during they were going through bankruptcy at that time. So like,
right,
and they were trying to set up movies. So like, I remember the phone calls where we would call talent and we had to sue them. Like literally, we would tell them
shit
because they were going through bankruptcy. So they had and it was like basically they just had to get the money back that they had given them, or at least they had to try. Right. So it was some more illegal thing. But I remember the meetings where it was like because I was working on Spider-Man office where like they were talking to Sony trying to decide when to announce that they were doing the Spider-Man movie. So
cool.
It was a great education because I saw sort of like the dark side, I guess. Like I saw the business side of it, but the reality, because it was Marvel at literally their lowest point. Like I worked at Marvel when it was, they had no film division. They were struggling to get the rights back stuff. They were in bankruptcy. So yeah, it was an education. And it set me up to sort of have a realistic view of how to approach the business side, I think.
But yeah, nothing like a little baptism by fire, especially
Right,
you can head out and do your own comic books.
Yeah, then I had a much more realistic view of how to do it. Like I knew if Marvel had trouble, and what they had done wrong, then I had to be aware of that kind of stuff. That was
Right.
also sort of like the lowest point in the comic market. Like that's 1997 to like 1999, 2000 is like sales nadir. Like it's like the worst time in comics. So I've always been kind of glad that I got to start in shit because
Yeah.
it's been better every year since then, really.
Cool. Yeah.
And so I kind of got to ride. I mean, I never got to ride the highest point like 1992, 93 when I could have put out Hack Slash and made fucking $1 million probably,
Right.
but I got to come in and see it kind of recover and sort of hopefully be part of that.
When you started doing your own comics, was that when you initially were putting Hack Slash out?
Well, when I started Devil's Due, I'd done a book called Love Bunny and Mr. Hell, which was like a proto Hack Slash kind of thing. It was like a superhero horror kind of thing, but it was funny. But I was working on that, and then when I started at Devil's Due, Josh put that out through Image. So like my first book is through Image, which is pretty cool.
Oh wow!
But it was like a small book, and it sold okay. But then I was drawing GI Joe for 2.5 years in there.
That's cool.
And, I love the gig. It's a great starting gig, but it had all these restrictions. So sort of, I don't know, out of frustration and just tiredness. And I was at the barbecue where Robert Kirkman pitched Eric Stevenson on Walking Dead. And I was like, I want to do a horror book. So, then I decided I would do pitch Josh a horror series that I was going to have Kirkman write, and then I was going to draw it. And then he got busy. I hired for a bunch of Marvel stuff, like Marvel Zombies and Marvel Up and some stuff. And then he couldn't do it, so I was like, I'll write it. I don't know how to write, but I'll write a book. And then I teamed up with Stefano, and it worked out fine. And I got a sort of again, like I always get the trial by fire. I just drop shit, and then I figured it out. And it was a modest, but it was a kind of cult success, I guess. And so we kept doing it. And I've been doing it now for almost 17 years. So,
yeah. Oh man, that's pretty cool. Yeah. When I met you at Crypticon, like this is the one that I know you for, the trauma book that you did with Devil's Due, which is just absolutely fantastic. I love Lloyd Kaufman.
Yeah.
And then that's when I was introduced to your Hack Slash. What a wonderful premise, taking the main villain from the book and the final girl and just teaming them up.
Yeah, and it was it was one of those things when I first started out, I didn't want to do something I had to research a lot because it would take time. Right. So, but I know B movies inside and out. I grew up. My dad was a huge horror movie fan, big B movie fan. So like I grew up on slasher movies and just schlock like Trauma. I grew up on all that kind of stuff, and so sort of diving into that wasn't like I could focus on the character stuff, but I already knew the genre, I knew the tropes, I knew all that sort of stuff, and so I kind of got to hit the ground running, I think, and it is one of those. It was a low hanging fruit, like it, and I hadn't seen Buffy. When I started out. I had seen the original movie back in the day, but I didn't have cable when I was working at the children's book company. I had no money. And so I didn't have cable, so I never saw Buffy. And then later when I was working at Hack Slash, people were like, oh, it's like Buffy with slashers. And yes, that's kind of what it is. It wasn't essentially that. I think we just come from the, Joss Whedon and I come from the same influences. Obviously, he has more talent, more money. But that's kind of where I think it sort of, that was the genesis, I think.
Yeah. Man, that's so cool. Now you mentioned you're working on GI Joe. Did the Trauma book come a little bit later after that? Having worked on that license, did that prepare you how to approach Lloyd and those guys at Trauma?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. We I'm working with Hasbro pretty closely because I was actually like the editor of GI Joe before I started drawing it, and so I knew how to run things by, get approvals, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'd always been a Trauma fan. I met Lloyd at a horror convention after I'd started Hack Slash. and Tiffany Shepis, who's one of the stars of those movies. And she and I became friends. We're still friends 17 years later. But, you know, I decided I want to do something with that. And I pitched them Devil's Due on this idea of doing this anthology series. And Lloyd basically just kind of gave us the permission to go crazy. It was fun as hell. It is also one of the hardest projects I've ever done in my life. There's a reason I haven't done a bunch more anthologies after that, because I wrangled, and everybody did work for Backend, which is amazing of them. But, you know, we had to like wrangle, I don't know, 35 people or something like that. It was hard as hell, and it was super fun. I'm glad we did it, but like it was an education. That it came out is kind of amazing, and it's a testament to all those people who were like understood that the spirit of trauma meant you kind of just fucking went for it and did whatever you could, and then have it shake out.
Yeah. Well, you're still the EIC, the editor in chief at Heavy Metal magazine, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd imagine you're essentially doing a lot of the same stuff too. You know, having to wrangle talent.
Yep. Yeah. Somehow that has become a thing I had to do for 20 years, even though I never thought that would be my job. But yeah, like I like working with creatives. I always have, and I really like sort of, I don't know, watching people improve. I guess it's sort of like a weird fetish of mine to some degree. Like I really enjoy like when someone starts out, you see somebody sort of talent, and then they sort of grow in skill. Like it's always been a thing. So editing comics allowed me to do that. Also, I always use Hackslash as a platform for that. Like if you look at the covers of our first 2 years, I was hiring people before they blew up, like Ryan Stegman and Brandon Graham, and all these people, all kinds of like Rebecca Isaacs. I hired to draw that, one of her first gigs. All kinds of creatives. Stefano Caselli was one of those. He's now a big Marvel artist. He was one of those people. I think I always had a good time doing that, which is why I want to be, or was happy to be, an editor at Heavy Metal, because that's part of the job. And then it's also kind of how I stumbled into being a teacher, I guess, because I dig doing that.
That's cool. Tell us a little bit about the teacher gig, because you're I think you're doing like 3 different courses. What are those?
Yeah. So basically, like a year ago, around a year and a little change ago, I got a call from a guy at Columbia College Chicago here, art school, and he just said that they were looking for somebody to teach a cartooning class.
Nice.
And at the time, it was November, if I recall, and I was like, so a year and some 3 months ago, and I just had a kid, and basically I was like, I really got to get out of the house. I really would like a job where I go hang out with people. So I said, sure, I'll do it. And then I started the job in January, and then in March we were locked down, and this is my fault. I tried to go see people, so I've been in the house in a year anyway, so it did not work. But those the sort of 7 weeks I got to go to a college and hang out with people who were sort of passionate about art and learning, like jazz. I'm still doing it, even though it doesn't involve that. Now it involves me, of course, doing Zoom like this. People over Zoom. But it's awesome. I teach 2 cartooning classes this semester and a storyboarding class. It's an animation department at the Columbia College Chicago. So it's video games, animation, that kind of stuff, and then I do the cartooning side and I do storyboarding and stuff.
Man, that's awesome. All in the love of trying to reconnect with actual humans. And
then having it fail miserably because I spent last year in my office, and so I had to redo my office because I've got like 60 kids a week looking at my office. Like, well, I got to give them something to look at. So
right.
Now it's got promotional stuff, got my own stuff back there, plus my weird Freddy He-Man from Mexico.
That's awesome. I love your comic book display over there in the corner too.
That is a particular. I've been waiting to get one of those for a long time, and the pandemic was the reason to do it.
That's so cool. So the next time you have guests over in a year or two, you can direct them. It's like, this is the Tim Seeley Museum.
Yeah, exactly.
Or library, I should say.
All good stuff. It's all the stuff. It's a combination of my latest stuff, but also just weird shit I like. You can see Scud and and Predator and Cherry and all kinds of stuff that I enjoy. So
Oh, that's so cool. So yeah, and yeah, God, you wear so many hats. You still illustrate, write your own stuff, all of which you pretty much fell into, and uh, you're working at DC. Like you're really well known for like your run on Nightwing here. Um, writing that series. What's that like? Having to go from doing your own creative own stuff to something for DC like that.
I mean, because I've always done both. It's not hard for me because I started out, when I was working at Devil's Due, like every month was GI Joe and Hack Slash, or you
Right.
know, the Dungeons and Dragons books and Loaded Bible or whatever. And so I can always, I guess I have to balance it to some degree because I think if I just did company owned stuff, I probably wouldn't be happy. But um, you know, as I've kind of learned a lot about comics in general, I think it allows me to sort of try on different sort of approaches. I mean, I know when I do Nightwing, I'm not going to do some of the shit I would do in Hack Slash. I don't even try. Like I don't, it's not like I'm fighting them. I know what they want, and I'm cool with that. And that allows me to work on something with a wide audience and something beloved and something I can give my niece and nephew and someday my daughter. Whereas like some of my other stuff I can't. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, maybe when they're like 16 or something, but I've always done it. I guess I've never had that career where I just do that one thing. Like I just, maybe that's to my detriment. I don't know, but I've always done like multiple, different approaches, creator owned and company owned. And like, I don't think I've ever had a month of my life where I wasn't doing one of each. I don't think ever.
Yeah.
So at least one of each, if not two of each. So
Yeah, it sounds like you have to, creatively, you have to have constantly have those, projects going. Is it, you, you, do you have to, have like that one, area where you've got that big long creative project going, and then, kind of churning out the more commercial stuff does that bring you a lot of satisfaction?
yeah, like satisfaction and then also money, I guess.
True.
Like
True.
because I've been freelance for so long, I have a pretty good sense of like what I have to, what I have to bring in every month to sort of cover bills and shit. And then, but I also, if I do Nightwing, if I do that for a year, then I know the royalties on that will come in, and then I can fund a creator-owned book, right?
Yeah.
And then it's just sort of like it's kind of like playing the stock market, but less amoral, I guess. And so it's I basically use this all, I take a little risk here, and then I do something sort of safer here, and all balances out, I guess. I don't know if I'll ever be able to retire, but I certainly have got myself set up so that I can do experimental stuff. I can, if I want, do 6 months of a creator-owned book and see how it works. I can, take a couple weeks and do like a film project. I can do other stuff because I've kind of built myself into a cushioned system, I guess. Is the way to put it.
Well, that's cool. You've got that constant churning of content that's just being turned out and shared with the rest of the world. I remember you coming out with the Hellblazer book.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is the version that was more directed to the primary DC superhero universe.
Yeah.
How is that like? Taking a character that's very kind of an adult, R-rated, into that world of mysticism, and translating it for that genre.
Well, I try to think about it in the way that like he started out there, right? Like the first Constantine story, like is only a few issues away from Crisis on Infinite Earth when he's hanging out with like Firestorm and shit,
Okay.
But, like he started out that way, and I understood the sort of siloing of the Vertigo universe stuff, but it was never sort of necessary. I don't think. To me, you can mix everything. It's always so weird.
Yeah.
People get like, "Oh, you can't mix these things." Like bullshit.
Right.
You can mix everything. So I get like telling us a Hellblazer story that you don't have to worry about. He's in the world of Superman, but then just don't mention Superman in that story. No problem. So that's kind of how I, when they said, "Hey, can you do like a 6-issue Hellblazer story. Yeah, I just had a good time with it. I brought in Huntress. I had him, what the hell, might as well, right?
Yeah.
And I think the contrast to that character is what my favorite thing about him, because he's like the working class magician of London. And
Yeah.
if he lives in the same world as all these other people, that's the interesting part. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I had a good time with it. I love that character. I think you can have different tones. Characters aren't people; they're not real people, so their lives can change to be more readable by this, and they, you just change their situation. It's sort of easy to do, I think.
Yeah, that's I think that's awesome. These characters do exist to be malleable. They can always revert back to whatever status quo after your run or years down the road. Anyway, they've been around for like somebody like Batman and Superman. They've been around for like 80 years, so of course they're gonna revert back to the status quo. But you've got that pocket of time. You might as well test the boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how I treat it. Like
Cool.
Like, and I even my own stuff, to some degree, like, yeah, I keep rules, but to me, as long as you're having fun reading it, who cares? I don't, I don't really have, like, I think Hack Slash can cross over with Chaos Comics easy. It can cross over with Army of Darkness easy. Like, I can figure out a way to make anything work. That's.
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah.
Speaking of which, that's.
Yeah, which that one works because Hack Slash, the first story, started out as an Army of Darkness pitch, actually.
You're kidding.
Yeah. So the first story with the killer pets and stuff, like here now. But when I was working at Devil's Due, when we first had success with G.I. Joe, Josh gave me he just said, well, what else should we go after as licenses? So I gave him a list, and it had Masters of the Universe, Army of Darkness, The Crow. What else did it have on there? A bunch of stuff. And so I did a pitch for Army of Darkness, which I drew a piece, and I can never find it, but it was Ash versus Killer Pets, and it was like, controlled by this deadite infested vet tech from whatever. So, and then when I started Hack Slash, I just dug out that pitch and I turned it into a Hack Slash story. So there you go.
Man, that's pretty cool. The the other thing too that comes to mind is you've been working on Masters of the Universe for DC, right?
Yeah, for a couple of years I've done. Well, I started out at Masters of the Universe with Dark Horse. I did the art book, and then I worked on She-Ra with DreamWorks, and then I did Injustice versus Masters of the Universe and the Masters of the Multiverse, and I did the mini comics that came with the 30th anniversary figure.
Man, wow, that's fantastic. Because like with something like with Masters of the Universe, it's such a big world, but it's your own little fishbowl to play around in.
The first comic I ever got, period, was the comic that came with one of the mini comics that came with my
the action figures.
Yeah, so that's what introduced me to comics. And then
cool.
The first DC comics I ever got was, in fact, it's framed on my wall back there, is Superman versus Master of the Universe. They did a promo comic, basically. And then, so it's part of my genetics in comics that He-Man, so I actually kind of resisted working on it for a while. We pitched for it back in 2001.
Right.
When we were doing G.I. Joe. We did not get it. MVP got it. And then, I don't know, we kind of just decided, over time, I let it open up to like, okay, I'll work on some He-Man stuff. I didn't want to ruin it for myself because it's like a hobby as well. But I mean, it's another thing I don't have to research. I know Master of the Universe upside and down, inside and out.
Nice.
So I'd have a great time working on it when it comes up. I think I get it. I think I get Master of the Universe. I also get a lot of toys from Master of the Universe, and they're all in my basement right now. So.
That's awesome. The me growing up with Masters of the Universe, obviously the toys, the cartoon, and even the movie that back then some people didn't really appreciate. I absolutely love it. I think a lot more now than I did as a kid, with all of its flaws.
I mean, I loved it when I was 10, and then like as I got older, I kind of was like, oh, this movie is not good. And then now watching, it's like, no, it's really like it's basically a Kirby. It's the fourth world. They did that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. It's clearly Dolph Lundgren is not very fluent in English when they filmed that film, but he's charismatic, and the other actors kind of pick up the dialogue train for him. And Frank Langella is having the time of his fucking life in that
Yep.
movie. He's chewing scenery and just hilarious. And it's that part of it. I think you can watch it just for Frank Langella.
Yeah, most definitely. Frank's so much fun. The thing that always came to mind for me was when it comes to like Dolph's accent, it's just like, well, yeah, he's from Eternia. Why
Right.
the jumping off point would be a foreign accent. It's like my question is, why does everybody else not have a foreign accent?
Well, yeah, they could have all had to speak like Dolph Lundgren and do that sort of Nordic thing and really mess with everybody.
That would have been a lot of fun. Even the poor guys in makeup. It's like, okay, you got to wear that, but you also got to sound Nordic. It's like,
yeah, go ahead, Billy Barty, have fun.
Yeah, except you, Frank, you're just fine as is.
Be yourself.
This is all based off of a toy. Who needs rules?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think there's always this sort of like need to make that stuff serious and adult, like older fans kind of get possessive of the stuff they grew up on. Like, but that was made for kids in 1987, and it totally plays for kids in 1987. And this idea, I think, of grim and gritty and realistic, like you don't need to do that. Just leave it.
No, I think that can work if depending on the story you're doing. Like obviously, the Christopher Nolan Batman, the Dark Knight films, in its own little universe, that's fine. But yeah, it's so hard to do that with something like Superman and stuff.
Yeah, which is why you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, most definitely. I remember you put out Loaded Bible too, Jesus versus Vampires. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit of how that came about?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was in college, my brother and I were driving around one day, and we were talking about because my brother and I, we're only 2 years apart in age, and so we spent a lot of our lives together, and we have very similar interests. And we were talking about like a movie that we wanted to do, which was basically like Jurassic Park, except they cloned Jesus from the Shroud of Turin. That was our pitch.
Oh, cool.
We're laughing, haha, funny. We're just driving around, coming up with shit. We're kids in a small town with nothing to do.
Yeah.
The idea, the nugget of that stuck in my head, and I kind of came up with this idea over time of like, that the church would, if Jesus came back, they would be disappointed in him because he's not what they make their money off of, which is Jesus was a different guy than the Jesus that is popular with the evangelicals, basically.
Right.
So, this is like 2004, I guess, and I had that notion then, so I was right, of course. But I decided to make like a fun sort of thing. And again, you can see the trauma sort of influences in it. It's schlocky, vampires and stuff.
Yeah.
But it has a serious message, I guess. But the cover is by my friend Stefano, who did the art on Hackslash, and I worked with Nate Bellegarde, and I think it turned out really well for something so goofy. And I remember when I pitched it to Eric Stevenson Image, he was like, "Huh, yeah, do that." But it came out sort of at the same time as Battle Pope, and I remember us getting letters, and Kirkman and I were getting in trouble because they've said Image Comics was anti-Christian, which I was like, okay, sure. But the other part with Loaded Bible that was crazy is it came out the same week as that there was a murder of a cartoonist, who had done a cartoon of Muhammad.
Right.
So I was like, they were asking cartoonists about like portraying religion and all this stuff. So like I was on NPR and I was on this religious radio network and all this shit, like for interviews for that, about like, can you portray religious figures? Can you make fun of them and that sort of stuff? So it kind of came out in this weird time when it was sort of like the perfect weird storm of, culture and the world coming together in my silly horror vampire Jesus comic.
That's interesting. Well, and based on that too, it's like taking that so seriously as well.
Yeah, I mean, and there's I guess you kind of saw that beginning of it. Then there was this like rise and sort of radicalized religion again. Right. You know, that's sort of like, I think it happens every time technology gets to a point, or when people start getting freedoms, like when, you know, when like gay people start having the right to marry and they're portrayed in pop culture. It's okay. And there's always this rise of like people like, no, that's not what it says, and
the backlash.
That backlash, and it's such a part of our world culture. It's a really big part of American culture.
Yeah.
You know, sort of doing that story then, like I guess one of the things in there is that, you know, in the future they run John Ashcroft as a political candidate in 2008.
Remember that? Yeah.
Which I was like, you know, I mean, I was off by a few years, but like they did a similar thing, right? I mean, we did get like those sort of far right, you know, evangelical candidates, and one of them did win, even though he was pretty not religious, but he was definitely their candidate. So it's interesting to look at it now and just be like, holy shit, there was some stuff in here that was scary, scary accurate.
Yeah, a lot of foreshadowing.
Yeah, exactly, and also a lot of blowing up vampires with Jesus spit stuff.
There's always that. That's always the icing, right?
Yeah. I can't do stuff without that kind of stuff. You know,
it'd be fun to see a Loaded Bible meets Blade series or something like that. You know,
I definitely thought about doing a hack slash Loaded Bible concert. I thought, cool. But I haven't. I've never pulled the trigger. I guess I got scared that somebody would, I don't know, try to blow me up or something.
Oh, pish posh. Yeah, no, I'd love to see that. I think that would be remarkable. Let me know when that comes to fruition.
Okay. Yeah, I'll hire you for a pinup.
Excellent. You're working with a lot of other publishers too. You've got Dark Red as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, I mean, Dark Red is another vampire series. If you haven't noticed, I like vampires and horror stuff, but basically, it's sort of another sort of allegorical tale. It's a vampire who, you know, has to like live out in the middle of nowhere in America. He has a job as at a 7-Eleven. He just works all night. It's just sort of about like the anger in rural America, using the vampire sort of story as a way to do it. Is based on stories my grandpa told me about World War II. And the character is a lot inspired by my grandpa in some ways. My grandpa was not a vampire, even though his name was Vlad. But it's basically just this, you know, my grandfather was what you would think would be the sort of angry far right guy. He fought in World War II. He, you know, but he wasn't. And so this kind of idea of like, you know, what makes people angry because they sort of feel forgotten. And my grandfather, I don't think felt forgotten. But you know, just sort of like exploring that stuff with, again, a vampire comic in which a vampire fights another group of Nazi vampires with stuff he bought at 7-Eleven, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, so like this is my thing, is to do these sort of allegorical tales, but make them schlocky and fun and anything. But they're about things that worry me, like, you know, the sort of rise in anger and the, you know, radicalization of rural Americans against progress, I guess, you know, so that's kind of what it's about. But yeah, so we did 12 issues. I just actually we're working on some more Dark Red as well. So,
wow, that sounds like a really, you know, fun but also very personal, you know, project.
Yeah, the issue 3 is basically based on a story my grandfather told me about when he was in World War II, and I used elements of his story to create Chip's backstory in World War II. And then after that book came out, not too long after, my grandpa died at 96. And so part of me was like really proud to be able to get some of the stories he had told into a comic, and also sort of made me feel goofy because I did it as a vampire comic. But I don't think he would expect anything else from me. So
yeah.
But you know, it's definitely it's one of the more personal things I've ever done for sure. You know, and just kind of like trying to capture some of the things, the wisdom of that generation before they're gone completely.
Yeah.
You know, and my grandpa lived a very full and long life, but like, how many World War II vets are still around, you know?
Right. They're, that generation, they're passing away, and with them, the knowledge too of what they went through, especially with World War II and who they were fighting against. I think
exactly. Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of what I would hope people would take from Dark Red, was that, Chip is one of these guys who lives in rural America, but he remembers the Nazis because he fought in World War II. He looks 23, but
Right.
he's 97 or whatever. And if when far right Nazi types come and try to recruit him, he's like, "Fuck you, I'm gonna kill you."
Yeah.
As opposed to how successful those guys have been, those
Mhm.
Nazis have been in radicalizing normal Americans today who forgot World War II, forgot what the Nazis did.
Yeah.
And so that was, sort of a concern of mine, that a reminder, I hope,
Yeah.
but also with crazy vampire shit.
Yeah. Well, and even in pop culture, we need those stories too.
Yeah.
You go back and like look at, even with like Trauma Films, like they're, the film that they distributed, Surf Nazis Must Die.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was still an underlying message in that film. It's just like, yeah, these guys are, fuckheads. What the hell are you doing wasting your time with them? It's like,
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And again, as part of that thing, we sort of moved away from history. Like, we don't teach history the way that we used to. And my God, if I have to do it with some comics, I'll try.
Yeah. Well, I've been talking to a number of comic book creators. They're in the middle, like Eric Battle's in the middle of creating a graphic novel on Emmett Till, and and that horrifying story.
Yeah.
But it's
local to here, Chicago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. Right. And but stuff like that needs to be kept in the public arena, in the public consciousness.
Yeah, I agree, because it's not that long ago.
Right.
It's easy to sort of forget that within 100 years there's been this massive change, but things were bad. They were, people didn't have rights, and they could be killed, and just for who they were, and it's so easy to forget that happened in the lifetimes of some people who are still around.
Yeah, Jason just reminded me. Elders and storytelling. You've got that long lineage of continuing to tell those stories in the indigenous arena too. That's oral history is one of the ways that their histories have been kept alive, and they're seeing so many of their elders pass on without really having those stories successfully translated.
Yeah, man, I definitely, our culture, I think, sort of has moved away from sort of the wisdom of elders to some degree. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. We listen to fucking Joe Rogan. Like, what the fuck are you listening to? Like, who's this?
Right.
Like, who? Just people who haven't experienced things the way that, authenticity, I guess, is what I would hope some of these stories have. I guess honesty.
Right. Well, one of the old tropes too with horror movies, especially with monster movies, is that idea of like monsters being personified as the other, and we're starting to retell that now, and making the other, they're the heroes, whether it's somewhat reflective of Black culture back then, and it's like realizing it's like, hey, we need to represent those individuals as the heroes, and making the monsters actual creatures or monsters or Nazis.
Yeah, agree. I'm with you 100% on that.
Yeah, and that's why I like guys like Jason here. He's a humanitarian and activist with indigenous people, and so he's always at the campfires listening to those tales too.
Yeah, I hope a good friend of mine, Jim Terry, he's a cartoonist I work with a lot. He just came out with a book. Actually, if I can plug something, he did a book called "Come Home India," which is his sort of biography. It's about being Native, and then also about alcoholism, and about comics and how they all go together. It's probably the best book I read last year. So if I can plug that for you guys, Jim Terry, "Come Home India." It's really, really good.
Come Home India?
Indio. Indio, like that was a nickname that he had as a kid.
Let me put this in the comic section. So wow, that's pretty cool. So that was an autobiography, huh?
Yeah, as a comic book.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a cartoon autobiography.
Wow, nice. That's one of the things too about like comic books and graphic novels. It's it's a medium it's still underappreciated, but like even as a format for like an autobiography or biographical, historical fiction. I mean, it's such an amazing tool, for sharing information and enlightenment as well as storytelling.
Yeah, I definitely agree. One of my biggest pet peeves is like this idea that comics is either too dumb for adults or it's too adult for kids. Where it's like, no, it should be appealing to all kinds of people, and we should tell stories of different. It's a medium just like film. It's a medium just
Yeah.
like novels. It's a medium like television, and so you can tell any story there. And again, like the autobiography thing is a recent, relatively recent addition. John Lewis did it that way, and
Right.
but yeah,
Right.
I definitely recommend Jim's. One of the things I say in the class I teach is just about how when cartoons and you're doing comics that way, the cartoonist is having a very direct connection with the audience when they're telling their story that way, partially because of the gutter, right? Like you are
Yeah.
letting the reader put themselves in there. They have to figure out and share with you your story. So I
Yeah.
think it opens empathy in a way that other things don't. So I recommend reading some good comic autobiographies. Definitely Jim's if you can get it.
Cool. The other thing too is with comics, I find that they are one of the most accessible mediums, just because especially with like youth today being overstimulated or whatever reasons, learning limitations, um, being able to have the image and then words combined, stimulates you just enough to keep you engaged and keep that page turning and stuff, and hopefully segue into other forms of media like books and other literature forms.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and maybe one of the biggest bummers I find is when I teach my cartooning classes, the first question I ask the kids is, "How many of you read comics?" And none of them usually raise their hand. And then I'm always like, "What? Oh, bummer." And then as I go through the semester, they read tons of comics, but they think when I ask comics, they think I mean like, you know, Batman and Captain America and stuff. They watch those as films, they don't read them as comics, but they read tons of comics. They're always on Webtoon and they read tons of manga and they actually love a much wider genre of comics than our generation does.
Yeah.
So they just don't think of them as comics. They think of comics as like the thing with the paper cover that's about that big and
Yeah.
usually has a superhero punching some other superhero. Which they like those characters, but they can get them in film, so they don't follow that inaccessible sort of version of it. So, but yeah, I think the Zoomers, they love comics. They absolutely grown on comics. They've read manga their entire lives. They've read web comics their entire lives. I think there could be a surge of that kind of reader. I mean, you're seeing it in bookstores now.
Right.
Bookstores said that this year was like it's like a double the sales of comics and graphic novels. I think those kids are coming up, and if you can catch them with the right stuff, which I hope we do, then we'll have a generation that reads comics the same way they would read anything else. They'll say they would watch a movie, same way they would watch a TV show.
Right. I think it's also really exciting too. Like the ones reading manga, like they're engaging with a completely different culture. Probably for the most part outside of the U.S. What we know is.
Oh yeah, it's actually. I mean, I find that interesting because they know things. They sort of understand the nuance of when I read manga. I think one of the hardest things for me is like, oh, that's a cultural divide that I don't quite. There's some reference there that I'm not getting, but they get that better than they get some of the American Western comics, which I think is
right.
sort of weird. But yeah, and one of one of my cartooning classes is watching them sort of apply what they know about manga to like their worldview, like their American worldview, and then it's really interesting. I think we're gonna have some good cartoonists coming out.
Oh, that's fantastic, and no doubt, from the talent that is Tim Seeley.
Yeah,
you're the new Hubert school.
Yeah, right, there you go. We can have
That's
vampire stories.
yeah. That's very very universal vampire stories, or you
Exactly.
know that'd be pretty awesome. Now, yeah, I think a while back too, like Hack Slash was, being pitched as a feature film project or something. You had a couple of properties I think that were
Well,
being looked at. That
yeah. I mean, I sold the rights to Hackslash in 2008, I think,
okay,
and then nothing has happened. I mean, a lot of things have happened, but nothing has been on screen. And I don't know. I've talked about it at length other places, but my experience with Hollywood has just sort of been that they don't really make anything. Like they talk about making things, but like I'm surprised when movies come out at all. I guess it's such a I don't know the ability. That's why I'm glad I'm in comics.
yeah.
Film is just hard to make, and I worked on a movie this summer, so I can
Oh,
definitely sort of now say that is definitely true. That film is hard to make.
yeah,
And if you do it cheap enough, it's easier to make a film because you don't have to, go through all these avenues to get money, and then it takes a lot of money, so you have a lot of voices, you have a lot of, fingers in the soup kind of thing. But yeah, I hope they get something done with Hackslash someday. But I'm not. If I hold my breath, I'll be fucking dead. So that's my basic approach to it. But I like film. I like animation, obviously.
yeah.
So just I'd rather do comics and not spend too much time having to figure out how to do that. But hopefully, though, someday we'll have some kind of hack slash, some kind of live action something. Hopefully.
That'll be cool, and hopefully it'll direct more readers to find the source material.
That's what I really want.
Yeah, yeah,
You know?
yeah, most definitely. Well, and in comics, there's so many more opportunities because you've got a smaller production team. You can turn out a lot more, like you said, with those less hoops than you would have in Hollywood.
Right. Exactly. And it's too bad it's not like film is the popular medium. It's the most popular medium, and so people. There's this weird sort of thing that happens a lot of times with hack slashes where people be like, "Oh, it's too bad you didn't get a movie." Like they only really want the movie. Like it's just read the fucking comic. I don't,
Yeah, yeah,
like, uh, or it's always like, well, how that should be a movie. It's like, well, that's a business decision. It's not a. It involves a whole lot of like lawyers and executives, and
right.
they're standing in the way of things being fun. So
Yeah,
comics, that's not true. There's very few executives standing in the way between me and you and Hackslash. So we can, it's a lot easier for me to direct that to the fan.
man, that's awesome. We're always looking forward to your next project, everything that you're putting out. Before we sign off, you mentioned growing up watching horror films with your brothers and a lot of your influence um, with your grandfather. Was there ever like a special horror movie or something that you guys always really connected on?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, mostly this was my dad because my dad is a big vampire fan. But Fright Night, the movie Fright Night that came out, I believe 1987, right? Good year for movies. But when I was a kid, that was like the first sort of vampire movie I super got into, and my dad kind of loved it because it was a little bit retro. They were kind of doing like the Hammer movie thing and all that, and so yeah, that was one we really connected about. And then I remember when Fright Night 2 came out, my dad was like, "Holy crap, they made another Fright Night!"
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was our. And so like Dracula, Frankenstein, the classics. My dad was always a big fan of, and then any vampire movie. So like
Cool.
we would always watch those together. Like all the '80s vampire stuff, Lost Boys, Vamp.
Yeah.
Remember that movie Vamp? My dad had that one. The
With
Howling.
Grace Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would always watch that kind of stuff. And then he like on Halloween he would run like we would watch the Universal stuff. So we would watch like Dracula and Frankenstein and Wolfman and Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein and all that sort of stuff. That's kind of how I'm into this stuff. Is my dad's obsession with that kind of movie.
Oh, that's so cool. Tim, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on and chatting with us about all the cool shit that you do and all the cool stuff that you're into. We greatly appreciate it. Hang around for just a few minutes. And for everybody that's watching, make sure to follow Tim on Twitter at Hackin' Tim Seeley. And, see all his, fun updates on new projects and new things coming up. And go find a lot of his old stuff, because this guy clearly has a whole spinner rack full of amazing stuff that he's put out over the years.
Yeah, you can buy it, too, because I need to get rid of some shit. So, go ahead and order some stuff off my Gumroad store and help me clear out my because the roof caved up or fell off on one side. I got to get rid of some shit. So come on in and pick some stuff up my Gumroad store, and I'll ship it to you. And you can put it in your house, so it's not in mine anymore.
Start your own spinner rack. I just got latex skins behind me. That's all.
Yeah, I was impressed by it causes kind of a haunting image behind you. Very nice.
Yeah, it's pretty spooky. This is Bill. That's Fred. It's like, it's the beginnings of good sausage. That's what that is.
Right, exactly.
Well, thanks so much, Tim. For coming on, and thanks for everybody that tuned in. And to my sponsors, Alien Donut Films, Angela and Bill. Thanks so much for your support. And to everybody, to my producers, Stefan Santa Cruz and Amanda Armstrong, thanks again for your help. Everybody out there, be good, be kind, help each other out during these hard times. We love you. Have a good one. Bye.